I'm Patrick Daly and welcome to Interlinks. Interlinks is a programme about globalisation and the effects it's had on Ireland and its relationship with other countries around the world over the last 50 years or so. In each programme, we interview a person from another country or a person with a strong connection to another country to get their unique perspective on globalisation, how it has affected them, their country and its relationship with Ireland. There's a little bit of history, a dash of economics, a sprinkling of business and an overlay of personal experience both from me and from my interviewees from around the world. The last two programmes we've had interviewees from two of our EU partners, Croatia and Spain. Today we're going to be focusing on a country on the other side of the Atlantic. So we're off to Mexico, a country both familiar to us from news, film and sport, and yet mysterious and unknown in many ways. We've explained previously on the programme that the processes of globalisation since the end of World War II have been driven by trade liberalisation, financial deregulation, advances in information and communications technology, and innovations in transportation technologies. Mexico is one of those countries in the world that has been most dramatically transformed by these processes due to its innate strengths and resources, as well as its proximity to the largest economy in the world, the United States. Think that just since 1960 alone, Mexico's population has changed from being 50% rural to 80% urban. Its population has more than tripled from 40 to nearly 130 million people. And its nominal GDP has jumped from 13 billion US dollars to over $1 trillion. On the one hand, Mexico has benefited greatly from free trade and foreign direct investment, as Ireland has, but it's also suffered as some of its traditional productive sectors were impacted by overseas competition, and it's also faced challenges related to both migration and security that have brought friction with its neighbour to the north. It's a country with massive potential for the future, notwithstanding some of the challenges it faces. It's a country that I visited for the first time in August this year, and I can attest firsthand to the fact that it is a vibrant and stimulating place of great natural beauty, wonderful people and fantastic food. So today we're talking to Miguel Malfavon, the Ambassador of Mexico to Ireland, who is here with us in the studio. Welcome, Ambassador Malfavon. Thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you for having us.
You're very welcome. To Irish ears, the name Mexico is quite familiar from the news, from film and sport and so on, and yet it's a country that's not so well known in detail by Irish people. I think there are two things that Irish people don't fully appreciate about Mexico. One is the sheer scale of the country, and the other is its precise location geographically. Can you tell us a little bit about the vital statistics of Mexico today?
Of course, thank you. As you said, Mexico, it's a very big country. It's almost 2 million square kilometers, if you compare that with 70,000 kilometers of Ireland. So it's several times bigger.
We fit into Mexico many times.
Many times. It is a country that if you draw a line just in the border from one side to the other, you will go from Madrid to Kiev in Ukraine. So it is a quite large country, and sometimes the news you can find in Mexico that something happened in Mexico, but it's so big that you can, whatever it's happening down in Croatia, it's completely different than what happens here in Ireland, and that big is the size of the country. Mexico has 125 million people, comparing to 5 million people here in Ireland. It has a GDP of 1.1 trillion. It's the second biggest economy in Latin America. And it is a country, as you had mentioned, it's in constant transformation. More than 80% of our manufacturers are exported. It's all the manufacturers produced and exported from Latin America are originated in Mexico. So it is a big transformation in a country that used to be very agricultural, and now it's a very industrial country. The country has been growing during the last few years, despite of adverse economic conditions, and it's one of the few economies, together with Ireland, that it keeps on growing. And we have been implementing, particularly during the last few years, different structural reforms in energy, telecommunications, the financial sector, allowing the country to be even more competitive every time.
Okay, there's often a misconception, I think, in Ireland that because Mexico is part of Latin America, it's a Spanish-speaking country, some people get confused and think it's in South America, but it isn't in South America, is it?
No, it is. Mexico is a Latin American country because we came from the same part and somehow we were formed at the same time. Than the rest of Latin America. We were colonized by the same country. But geographically, Mexico is located in the northern part of the continent. So that's geographically is North American. The way that we see it is that Mexico is the center of the crosses of different worlds, from North America, the South, Latin America. Also, if you look into the east, we have historic links to European, that we, in so many ways, we have European backgrounds, but also we have strong connections to the Pacific Alliance, to the Pacific, together with the Asian countries. So Mexico is in the center of 4 different worlds at the same time, and that's what we take advantage of that, and you can see on how Mexico is growing during the last few years.
And how long has Mexico had an embassy in Ireland, and how has the relationship between the two countries evolved over the years since then?
It's Ireland and Mexico. We have had historical relations in many ways. Actually, Ireland was part of our independence. Mexico gained its independence thanks to the people coming from Ireland. In Mexico City, in the main avenue, you can have the monument for independence, and underneath you have there is a sculpture dedicated to Irish people who were with us from the independence. Later on in life, in 1846, precisely when Ireland had this big famine, Mexico benefited somehow because of that too, because we also had people coming from Connemara, from Clifden, in north of Galway. There is a very famous soldier who went to Mexico and fought on the Mexican side against the Americans when we lost half of our territory. So they are known as the St. Patrick's Battalion, a battalion that was formed for 120 people, more or less, led by an Irish person. So we had a lot of a part of our history is growing together with Irish backgrounds. But we can say that diplomatically we have a very young relations. We established diplomatic relations in 1975, so it's 43 years since we established diplomatic relations. It's a very young relationship. The Embassy of Mexico opened up here in 1991, and Ireland opened its embassy in Mexico in 1999. So since then, both countries, both embassies are working in increasing and promoting closer relations.
And how long have you been ambassador of Mexico here in Ireland? What are your main priorities for the Mexico-Ireland relationship during your term?
I've been here in Ireland for 2 years. It's a privilege to be here. My first posting as an ambassador, and it's a posting that we always get so happy that the way that we get to know more people here in Ireland and how close we are in many ways. It is for us a pleasure to see how relationships are growing. We have many coincidences in the way that we've been grown up, both in Mexico and Ireland. And the more that you spend time here in Ireland, you can see those coincidences. We both are countries of migration. We both are countries where we share a similar religion, most of the population, the Catholic religion, giving us in the family the same values, the same conceptions. But also we both are neighboring to a large, big country, which influences the way that we behave and the way that we understand the world. So in many ways, we share a very similar perspective and similar point of view. So our political dialogue is quite easy, and in that sense, we understand each other very well. So we are trying to continue on promoting trade, investments, cultural activities between both Mexico and Ireland. So we get to know more, the more that we will be able to go ahead in our relationships.
Yeah, I think another thing that maybe people don't always realize is that Mexico is Ireland's largest trading partner in Latin America. And I believe the volume of trade is in excess of 2 billion euros at this stage.
That's correct. Mexico is the first economic partner from Ireland in Latin America. 70% of Irish exports to Latin America are concentrated in Mexico. It's our trade, if you consider not only goods but also services, it's above $2.5 billion US. Which is, if you see it on that perspective, Mexico is the main partner for Ireland in Latin America, but also Ireland is among the top 8 markets for Mexico in Europe.
Really? That's surprising. Yeah.
It is actually surprising to see that, even though that it's the size of the country, you might think, okay, well, it's not that big, but actually we trade more bilaterally, Mexico and Ireland, than what Mexico has with many other European countries, which bigger, larger communities. So we do have an extensive trade concentrated in pharmaceuticals, IT industries, and the potential is quite even bigger to grow even more on agricultural sector now that we have signed, we finalized the negotiation of a new free trade agreement between Mexico and the European Union.
And do you know what is the stage of progress with that free trade agreement? Does it need to go through the parliaments here in Europe?
They are currently in that part of the process of translating the text of the agreement, translating it into the different languages. So hopefully by the end of the year might be ready to be presented to the parliaments in both in Europe and in Mexico. And hopefully sometime next year it can be already fully implemented. So, and we will be benefiting a lot on particularly agricultural products, where we will be able to trade a lot more than what we do at the moment.
Yeah, it's curious, isn't it, that on the one hand we have countries pulling out of free trade agreements, and yet on the other we still have countries putting new trade agreements together.
And I think that in that sense, Mexico and Ireland, we share very similar perspective. We both are countries very open to free trade. We both have seen the benefit of it, and we are both economies looking into continue with that, because we see how much we benefit from that. Mexico in somehow used to be a very close economy many years ago, and how we open up our economy in that sense, we could see the benefit on our own growing economically and development.
And you had this year in Mexico presidential elections. So your current president, Peña Nieto, will hand over power to the new president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador. They call him AMLO, right? AMLO, yeah. AMLO. In December, I think, is the handover?
Yes, it's December the 1st will be the transition. Okay. Mexico, it's a very big country, and it's a mosaic. It's the way that we see it sometimes, a world in its own. So one of the things that you can see the how big the country is, and you need some areas that probably need more attention than others, but the country is quite big, and as of December the 1st we will have a new government, probably looking into new ways of bringing up particularly social sectors that have been delayed in somehow they haven't been growing or integrated into the world economy as efficiently and positively as we would have liked. But probably that's one of the ideas that the new government is looking into, how to bring back all the growth of the less developed areas of the country.
So you see that as the main challenge for the future, is that development?
Development, it's definitely there. I mean, Mexico, as many other countries, have different challenges, but development is one of them, certainly. The fight of the inequalities in the country. Again, being such a big country, you have some regions that are much more developed than others. So the attention will be concentrated in bringing up all those areas that are still behind in that part of the development. The fight against corruption and violence that is still growing in Mexico, that's one of the areas that the new government will be paying more attention.
So we touched on the scale of Mexico a couple of times. So it's something like 4,000 kilometers from one corner to the other. It spans across 4 time zones, just like the US, really. Mm-hmm. And I guess a consequence of that scale is this huge diversity that, again, may not be so familiar to Irish people. So from a cultural, business, tourist point of view, what would you say are the main regions of the country that Irish people should be aware of?
Actually, the whole country has, depending on what would you like to do. If you are interested in traveling to Mexico as a tourist, Mexico will have different regions and different perspectives. You can visit archaeological sites where ancient societies group, the Mayas, the Aztecs, or you can decide to go to colonial cities where you could see the richness of this, of being part of the Native Americans, Native Mexicans with Europeans and Spaniards, and they came together with colonial cities. Or you can go to modern cities where you can see the growth and the perspectives on the future. You can make it together with beautiful beaches, but you can also have mountains. Mexico is one of the 15 largest diverse countries in the world. So you can have on natural activities together. For example, if you are interested in adventures, tourism, you can practice it. So it is a very, very vast country. If you are planning to go to Mexico on business, then you can also have a very different type of, perspective. Depending on what kind of business you will be going to do, then you will be able to find different parts of Mexico. If you're interested in more gastronomical perspective, then again, Mexico has so many different varieties in its region. So you can also have a different ways of trying Mexican food, and so depending on what you would like to do, then you can have a variety of options in Mexico.
Okay, and Mexico now, with the economic development, is something like the 14th or 15th largest economy in the world. It's a member of NAFTA. It's a leading member of the Pacific Alliance and other international organizations. It ranks highly now, notwithstanding the challenges that you pointed to on Human Development Index, GDP, and so on. And all of this has happened basically since the Second World War, the end of the Second World War. So it looks like Mexico has been a great beneficiary of all of these processes of globalization, which is a theme of this program. So what's your own perspective on globalization? Has it been good for Mexico? Has it been bad? How do you see it?
It has been extremely good for Mexico. The Mexican economy started opening up drastically since 1986. That we become part of GATT, the former GATT, and then in 1994 we signed our free trade agreement with North America. And then since then, we've been signing a series of free trade agreements with all the different regions. Nowadays, we have signed free trade agreements with 46 nations, 46 countries. That allows to have free access to more than 1,000 people, more than 1 billion people in the world, free access with products. We have free trade agreements with North America, with several Latin American countries, with Europe, and with the Asia Pacific too. We just we signed the membership to the Trans-Pacific Agreement, so that with that we will be able to reach out countries like Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam, with free access for our products to those countries. So it is a very, very open economy. And that's why many companies and organizations, they go and produce in Mexico, and from there they can get free access to many markets. So depending on what you want to do and how do you want to do it, then they have the capacity to do it from Mexico. You can see, for example, how much Mexico has benefited from this openness. We passed in 1975, our total trade was a little bit more than $3 billion US. Nowadays, it's more than $800 billion. Just as an example, every minute between Mexico and the US, it's $1 million in exchange of goods. $1 million per minute. So it is extremely extensive the trade and the possibilities that through Mexico we have to reach other countries. It is expected that by 2050, Mexico will be probably the 7th largest economy in the world, just after China, India, US, Indonesia, Brazil, and Russia. So it is one of those big countries that it's still that giving a lot of possibilities for growth.
So it's going to be a big player in the future.
Totally.
So one aspect of globalization that's a challenge, and we hear a lot about it in the news lately, is immigration. And Mexico itself has been in the news because of this. Although I understand that more Mexicans are now returning to Mexico from the US than going the other way. Nonetheless, Mexico is a route to the US for migrants leaving other more unstable countries in the region, such as Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, and so on. So what do you think will be Mexico's approach to this delicate issue in the coming years?
Mexico, it's a country of migration. it is a country that has been moving from different perspectives. Originally, Mexico used to be a country of origin of migration, just like Ireland. But over the years and the way that the economy is growing and is being able to accommodate its own people, is moving from being a country of origin to be a country of transit. Those from Central America or other places going through the north, or it's been a country of destination, those who want to stay in Mexico, but also it's a country of return. And nowadays, there, as you said, there are more Mexicans returning from the U.S. than those who are moving to the U.S. And you have to keep in mind that there is maybe because of this experience that Mexico has on migration, we can clearly see the strong connection that exists between migration and development. And this is one of the areas that we are working very closely, not only with our the nations in the South Central American countries, but also in the North. We are working with them both in the United States and Central America in creating the capabilities for those countries to grow and to keep their own development in order for them to their population to remain in their own countries. We saw that that was part of our country couldn't provide, and now that the country is growing, the people are coming back and growing in many ways. So it is the connection between migration and development is extremely close, and we believe that we need to have a regular, orderly, and safe migration. But in order to do that, you have to find the reasons why people migrate, and you have to work on those reasons in order to mitigate the effects, particularly the negative effects of the migration.
So it sounds like Mexico will be an agent for stability in the region to try to help those neighbors and countries that are having difficulties.
We see ourselves in the sense that we have how we see how we grew up in that part of migration, how migration affected nationally, how we lost a lot of people that were, particularly when they have they are grown up enough and to start working, and then we're losing this capacity of incorporating that people. We can see the benefits on development if they stay at home. We can understand very well all the different perspectives on those countries of origin, countries of destination, but countries of transit, because we have all aspects of this phenomenon within ourselves. So we are extremely working very closely on cooperation with Central America, and even bringing cooperation, not only that one that Mexico is capable to offer to Central America, particularly, for example, in the construction of infrastructure in those nations, but also we are working with many other countries on how can we make a triangular cooperation. So not only Mexico can also support them, but also countries can help us together to work with those economies to help them to grow and to have their own development and make people to stay where they want to be at the end of the day. Many of them are moving from one place to the other because they have the need to provide for their own families. So as long as they can find a good job in their own countries, I'm sure that they will rather stay there than cross.
And returning to Mexico then itself, I guess it's well known, if you like, for certain produce, particularly avocados, lemons, and here in Ireland we see the Corona beer, which is quite popular. But there are many other sectors in Mexico that we might not be so familiar about. So where do you see the greatest economic potential for the country in the 21st century?
Probably one of the biggest sector, where we can see more potential is certainly the human capital, which is the greatest. We are a young country in many ways. The average age in Mexico is 27 years old. So you still have a very young force that it's ready to go to the market. It's a very, very diverse. We are very innovative in many ways. It's growing. All the arts and innovation sectors are working quite well. The informatic, the telecommunications, the software, the IT industries, the aerospatial industries are working quite well. but also more than anything is what we're working nowadays. It's the what we call the industry 4.0, that cross-cutting impact of information and the communication technologies, putting together the Internet of Things in various industrial sectors. We are working so strongly in this fourth industrial revolution and making the connection between the digitalization, the automatization, and the human capacities in growing. That's one of the areas that is growing quite dramatically in Mexico. And just a few months ago, Mexico was was invited as a guest in the Hanover Mass, the biggest exposition on the industry and technology together. And Mexico was considered because of its capacities, the possibility that and the way that it's growing. So that's one of the areas that probably more and more you will see that perspective. It is true that Mexico is a very agricultural country, but more and more it's a manufacturing and high tech manufacturing.
First world high tech economy.
Absolutely.
And talking of business, I think I remember you told me that you came from a business family. Tell us a little bit about the family business and how being the son of an entrepreneurial businessman shaped your perspective on work and the economy.
It's interesting because my family, both my parents came from the countryside. My father used to be first a farmer, more than anything, and he was producing sugarcane. And then later on, he moved. Part of the same growth of Mexico, he moved from the countryside to the big cities, and over there he worked in opening ice cream shops, and so it is. I mean, I used to work with him both in the farm and in the ice cream shop also. But more than anything, probably what you could see is the possibility on how Mexico is growing and was growing at that time, that gave you the possibility not only to keep and stay and doing exactly the same job as your parents. It used to be many years ago. Nowadays, the economy grew up and became so diverse that will give you the possibility that even though that your parents were from the farm, from the countryside, you can become a diplomat, or you can become and be a doctor, or you can be a teacher, whatever you may want to do, and not necessarily to follow the same career as your parents. So it is. It's quite interesting in that sense how the economy and the country open up to many other careers and ways of working and moving ahead.
And the family business was ice creams.
Ice creams. I used to make them, and I used to. So whenever I go, and actually, I need to make just a commercial in that we were so proud because all our ice creams were made with natural fruit, real fruit, not necessarily with flavors. So I'm always looking into whenever I go and try, is this real natural flavor or not? But it is.
When I was in Mexico, I really enjoyed the food in August. What are your favorites, and what would you recommend to Irish people lucky enough to visit Mexico? What should they try when they go?
Well, Mexico is again a very, very rich in gastronomy, in food products, and depending on the region that you may want to. And certainly, you can see, part of the Mexican history, the traditional or the contribution of food from Mexico to the world. Corn, for example, came from Mexico. And the chocolate, the cacao, it came from Mexico. The tomatoes came from Mexico. Of course, the avocados, vanilla. All these products came originally from Mexico, and now they are all distributed everywhere. So, we are very fond of making and trying different food, and of course, it has to be a little bit spicy just to get a little bit
make it interesting.
To make it interesting enough for people to what is this, but I like. From corn, you can make tortillas, which is the basis of our food. And from tortillas, you can make so many different products, from tacos to quesadillas, or so many nachos. Or you can create with the same product. It's so versatile that you can create any food that you may want to.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you for having us, and it's a pleasure to. And hopefully, I was. Probably just to create that need for people to go and get to know more about Mexico and the possibilities. I do believe that we can do together much more than what we are doing at the moment. We both are countries that we are in that part of the diversification process, that it's a need for our own countries. We are so much concentrated in our neighbors, and we can give more together and work together in many other areas. And hopefully with this, people can be interested in getting to know a little bit more of Mexico.
Definitely. It's a fabulous country. I really enjoyed my time there, and I'm sure any businessman or any Irish tourist will also have a wonderful time if they venture to that part of the world. So thanks again, and thank you to our listeners. We look forward to welcoming you again when we explore further countries around the world. We have coming up in the following weeks Poland, the US, and then back to Spain for a bit. Thank you and goodbye.